Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. 2 weeks in a row, we're back in the flow. Here we go. Tyler, how we doing?
Doing well, like you said, 2 weeks in a row. We're finally, back doing this consistently. And, we had our first weekend of NFL playoff football. If I could speak English here, that would be great. And it was a fun one. So I'm happy to review those games looking next week. And then we got something a little extra at the end.
Yeah, We Ball podcast is back up and running, and we have a lot of big stuff going on right now behind the scenes. We got a lot of plans. We talked about some of the things at the end of the last podcast. So if you haven't seen that one, go check it out. But we're going to dive right into updating you on our predictions, see how we did this weekend, and just talk about some of these games because my New York Football Giants, the ones that he said we're going to lose to the Vikings, did not lose to the Vikings and are playing in the divisional round versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And I live in Philly right now, so my existence is just peachy keen.
Yeah, you're beyond enemy lines, and I was just wrong. I'll admit it. I was wrong about the pick. I thought that the Vikings were better than I thought they were getting a little lucky with the one-score games, but I was like, you know what? Maybe it just shows how good they are. Maybe we should be looking at their record, not the fact that they just keep playing in one-score games. But I was wrong. They clearly are not the team that a lot of people thought they were. Their secondary got torched by whatever Isaiah Hodgins is, and it was just an absolute Brian Dable, Daniel Jones masterclass, and that was something I was not expecting.
Daniel Jones was named the Nickelodeon Most Valuable Player of the week, so that is a dream come true for me personally. But yeah, I'm really happy with that performance. I think that Mike Kafka is getting looks because he's been such a good play caller this year. However, do I think Mike Kafka is actually going to be a head coach this year? No. Do I think he's, unless we win it all? But don't see that happening personally. But it's cool. I like that the Giants are good without a good roster. It's a lot of fun, and it only makes me more excited for what we're gonna do when we have an actual roster.
Yeah,
Micah McFadden.
You're playing with house money right now. I mean, this team is obviously they were not expected to be a playoff team, much less a competitive team, and now they have not only made the playoffs but won a playoff game. So anything here is just icing on the cake for a great first year for Dable, and what really is, even though I don't want to say this, a coach of the year level of campaign.
I mean, there was no question about that. I think, when the other candidate loses like 6 of his last 7, he probably shouldn't win it. But we're going to move on to the game that I just threw shade at. The Miami Dolphins. Mike McDaniel, what are you doing?
I mean, there was the rumor that it came in from his own guys on the sideline that it was like first down, so he had the wrong guys on the field, or potentially that the headsets weren't working right. There's a lot of things coming in, but I think a lot of it is just copium for something that has been a long-term problem with the Dolphins all year. It didn't matter who was under center. They could not get to the line. It seemed that every single drive, especially ones that ended up being derailed, were done so by pre-snap penalties, especially delay of games. I wouldn't be shocked if the Dolphins led the league in delay of games or delay of game preventing timeouts. The reason they didn't even have timeouts going into that point is because of pre-snap penalties and delay of games ruining the rest of the game, the rest of their timeouts. They had to use them all on those kind of penalties. They have a clear problem there. The fact that they were in the game was fun, but nobody really expected them to be able to come out with a win. And Josh Allen was on fire for a majority of the game. So I didn't expect when it came to crunch time that it would be that close, but I really don't know what to say. Mike McDaniel has to improve in those clutch scenarios because it has been a problem all season long.
The Bills looked beatable, and that's weird.
They've looked beatable every time they've played Miami.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these games have come down to the first game we won by 2. The second game, the Dolphins lost and the Bills won by 3. And the second game, the last game, the Bills won by 3. So it's been a total of like 8 points. And that's against the Miami Dolphins team that has lost games to the Patriots, the Packers, not great football teams that did not make the playoffs or did not, perform well throughout the season. So you never know. They probably are beatable, although I do think that a lot of that was like some fluky stuff. I don't think you're going to see the kind of blitz fumble touchdown that you saw from Miami, like with many other teams, just because not many other teams are going to blitz Josh Allen like that, because for a majority of the game, it wasn't working. And then you get lucky on plays like those. And then there's another touchdown that came off of, or maybe it was a field goal off of a long kick return by Cedric Wilson. So that's like 10 to 14 points that Miami probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So I'm not sure how legitimately beatable the Bills actually are and how much of it was kind of like luck in playing a divisional opponent that's seen you 2 times already. But like you said, they definitely did look beatable.
Okay. I have to interrupt this because something just came to my attention. Chris Sims, we all know Chris Sims is a clown, first of all. He just says whatever he wants and only has a job because of who his father is. But he said Josh Allen does not have the weapons the other QBs playing this weekend have. Who's Daniel Jones' number 1 receiver?
Isaiah Hodgins.
What team did Isaiah Hodgins get cut from?
The Bills.
The Buffalo Bills, because their wide receiver room is too deep.
I mean, what team is he looking at that like what other number?
I'm angry.
Aside from the Giants, let's look at the other team's number 1 receivers that are still left in the playoffs. Christian Kirk. Stephon Diggs is better.
Garbage, but
he's been very good this season. Yes. Stephon Diggs is just exponential. I think Stephon Diggs is probably, am I wrong to say that he's the best receiver left in the playoffs? Who can I think of? AJ Brown
or Jamar?
Stephon, Jamar, or AJ Brown are the top 3. And I would take Diggs number 1.
Right
and then
now.
Gabe Davis is whether or not I understand, I think Chris Sims, or maybe it's either Chris Sims or Dan Orlovsky brought up the point that the Dolphins did not play scared of Gabe Davis, but that's not because of Gabe Davis. It's because they play that way against every single team that they play against. It is spam the blitz, and we don't care about your number 2 receiver. If he goes off, he goes off. We are going to spam blitz and hang safeties over your number 1 guy. And Stephon Diggs still ate against the Dolphins, and the Bills still won. So it's just how the Dolphins play the game. The Bills have very good weapons. I don't get that.
And then they have Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox is
an underrated tight end.
Probably the 4th best tight end.
I mean, who else is who else? I mean, Kelsey,
Goddard, Schultz, and Kelsey.
And Kittle.
Oh, Kittle's still in. Wow. Okay, yeah. He's the 5th best tight end. Then
I think you can do him and Goddard, but yeah, I'm probably still taking Goddard.
I'm probably taking Goddard. But like,
so yeah, 5th.
Then they have the depth of like
5th. That's 5th. That's like in the same range though, as like he's in the same range as all the ones who aren't Kelsey and Kittle, I would say. He's still in that like Schultz-ish range. Yeah,
and then there's they have like Khalil what's his last name? Khalil Shakir. Yeah, he's a great depth piece for them, barely sees the field, and he would be wide receiver probably 2 on the Giants, maybe 1.
Yeah, they got Shakir. They've got, I mean, Cole Beasley is nothing special anymore, but I mean, it's not a terrible. Yeah, Isaiah McKenzie is. I don't know if it's just because every time he plays the Dolphins, he gets like 3 touchdowns, but Isaiah McKenzie is a pretty solid receiver. Jamison Crowder, I think it might still be on that roster.
And then you look at their running backs; they have a decent stable of 3 guys who.
And they also that isn't how they run their team. They're not going to run the team that they want to run the ball down your throat. And when they do, it's Josh Allen who does it. So.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a ridiculous statement, and I'm sorry we went off on this tangent.
Why are we talking about their weapons and not like Kansas City's, who's rolling out God knows what besides Travis Kelce? Like,
well, I mean, some of those guys are pretty good.
There's no Stephon Diggs level receiver.
Yeah, the Chiefs probably have worse weapons than.
I would say so.
Do the Bills have the second best core of weapons behind the 49ers left in the playoffs?
It would either be them or the Eagles, but I'm probably taking the Bills, guys. I just like Stephon Diggs more than AJ Brown, and I also don't even like. I mean, Devontae Smith, Gabe Davis, I guess is.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. They're
second or third among the teams that are left, and that's more than enough to win playoff games. That is not the team we need to be talking about not having weapons. Well, What other games do we need to cover? I know that the game that just happened last night, we probably should get on,
I was
or
right.
not
You were
last
wrong.
night,
That's all
but
I have
two
to
nights
say.
ago. But Bucks, Cowboys, I was wrong. I should have rode with my gut and my like fandom for Dak Prescott because I have been a Dak supporter all year, even though there are a lot of people that have jumped off the train. I was like, Dak is still good. And then it got to me because I was like, when these teams play, it seems like the Bucks always win. But I should have thought about the fact that this is clearly not the same Bucks team, and it's not the same Tom Brady as it once was.
No, I think it was. I don't want to say it was an obvious choice.
It
I just
should have
want.
been more obvious than I made it, to be honest with you.
I just think it's my luck. Like I'm in Philly. The 3 of the 4 teams left are NFC East teams. The 2 that I care the most about beating. Um, it's just, of course, this would be the year that the Giants are like relatively good. Is the year that the entire NFC East is incredible. So, I feel like there's just too many good players on the Cowboys, if I'm honest, and they have probably the best OCDC in the league. Both of those
Definitely,
guys get head.
for
They,
sure. One
they
of
always
them.
get head coaching looks. I mean, they'll probably lose one of them this year. And I'm sure Kellen Moore would have liked McCarthy to get fired if they lost that first playoff game because he probably would have just been gifted the job since he's been there for so long. Unless Jerry Jones wants to make a splash. But now that's not going to happen, and he's going to have to wait around for another year before Jerry just, rips Mike McCarthy's head off. But, it's the Cowboys. They were bound to win a game in the playoffs eventually. And, of course, it would be against Tom, and, of course, it would be an away game. And,
and it was
now
a
they have to
Dak
go against a
glass man. It's fun seeing a lot of these quarterbacks who, I mean, obviously Daniel Jones and Dak are not like given the same tier of quarterback. Like they're not being given that title. But Dak and Daniel Jones are probably 2 of the most slandered quarterbacks in the entire league. So seeing both of them shut guys up, even if it's for a week, was just a lot of fun.
I mean, even Brock Purdy, which we should probably talk about, has been getting slandered just for doing his job. Like, people are like, well, he's in the easiest system. Yeah, well, so half the league runs this system. He has the best weapons. Okay, how is that his
what
fault?
we've proven from this playoff game, and you watch the 49ers, is that there's the Shanahan system that like 20 teams in the league are running or whatever it is. It's something stupid. And then there's actually Kyle Shanahan, who you watch the route combinations that he puts on the field and the running looks that he gives his team. And it's like even Mike McDaniel, who people were talking about, like, yeah, that's the best guy running that system who isn't Shanahan right now. I understand McVay runs it, but it's very much different. But if you're saying like, oh, Mike McDaniel's the best guy running it who isn't Shanahan, well, the gap between those two is astronomical because there is no guy who knows this system like the guy whose dad pretty much created it in Kyle Shanahan. It is masterful what he puts on display every week. And Brock Purdy, don't get me wrong, is playing very well. But the fact that he has a guy who is the last pick in the entire draft and their offense is humming like this, like there's no better or more fun offensive coach and offensive scheme to watch than that 49ers one that they put on film every week.
Yeah, I don't think other than, I don't think there was a single game this season where Jimmy G or Trey Lance played better than almost every game that Brock Purdy has played so far.
Agreed. And Trey Lance only played one game. So it was like we obviously didn't get to see, and it was in that like tsunami essentially. So we didn't really get to see what Trey Lance would have actually looked like in this system. I have a feeling it probably would have been pretty good. But we didn't really get to see that. And then Jimmy Garoppolo was playing pretty good football. But Brock Purdy has had some games where it's like, wow, he is better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And it just keeps coming out, it seems, every single week. And now it just keeps moving on. And they got the Cowboys next week.
Yeah, they're a force to be reckoned with. They always are with Shanahan. It's just a matter of if the quarterback that he has playing quarterback at the time can not make errors. And that's all you have to do is not make mistakes in that system.
I know that I know you predicted it last week, but it is going to be so much fun watching Kellen Moore versus Kyle Shanahan this week. I think that is probably going to be the most fun matchup of two teams that we're going to have. But
Just wait for Brian Dable versus Nick Sirianni.
oh, for sure.
Battle of the dogs.
But I think a game that we got to touch on next was probably the craziest, at least when it comes to comebacks that we've seen in quite some time.
So insane.
The Jaguars, man. What a second half from Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence, 4 first half interceptions? Or was one of them second half? Whatever it was. 4 interceptions, and then to come back and throw, I believe, or have 3 touchdowns and come back down 27-0 and go win a playoff game against the Chargers, who, say what you will about their offense, they were playing pretty good football in the first half, and then their defense was on fire for that entire first half, because Brandon Staley, as much as people don't like to admit it, is very good at coming up with game plans. It just totally fell apart in the second half, and they took over.
Here's my thing. I understand Brandon Staley. He's great, right? He's great at making these game plans. He doesn't make game plans that are sustainable over an entire game. His defense is way too risk-reward based, and he has the players for that. Guys like Bosa, Khalil Mack, Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr., who is awesome in that system because he's a risk taker. But you can't hold that for an entire away playoff game. Or was it just home or away?
It was away. It was in Jacksonville.
Yeah, there's just no way you can sustain that. It's too much of a risk. You have to make some sort of, change and adjustment. I understand that it's working, but they're going to adjust at halftime to the way that you're playing. They're going to be safer with the ball. And Trevor Lawrence ended up becoming, not trying to go out and prove something. He just went out and played football, and he ended up coming back 27-point deficit.
And I think the biggest thing it's not as much for me, Staley, as it is that offensive staff just needs to go. It's
they're gone.
They are gone now. That I forgot that Lombardi is officially fired, but he had to go because it's not even just the fact that the passing game is so pedestrian with Justin Herbert, who's an absolute freak. It's the fact that they can't run the ball at all. And when you're up 27-0, it's the running back's job to go or the running game's job, offensive line, scheme, running back, to go salt away the game. And they just could not do it. And I don't know if that's Austin Eckler, who I think there's a stat that he's never gotten 20 carries in a game before, which is absurd. I don't know if it's only him or the fact that they can't scheme up a run game, but thank God they got rid of Lombardi there, because they have to go get somebody who's going to be willing to take shots and then have an aggressive run game. Because even Jacksonville, we saw when they were down, had big runs with Travis Etienne. You have to be able to have an aggressive run game and create explosives both ways. Because even if they go out and they get an explosive pass game guy in Jacksonville, they need to be able to balance that with big gains on the ground. And that's just how all of the best teams do it. Like we were just talking about with San Francisco, because San Francisco can be down 14 and you're like, okay, Brock Purdy's going to start passing now. And then it's a Christian McCaffrey 30-yard gain, and all of a sudden they're in your territory about a score. And that's the kind of thing you need. And we've seen it with just about every team. And we know how much Justin Herbert's going to need that in the future.
I said it on the pod that, listen, Doug isn't going to be afraid to continue to feed Etienne the ball because he knows how that defense works. It's very obvious on film that their run defense is not good, and that because of the risks they take, they over pursue and they leave giant gaps. And they took advantage of it and then used it to Trevor's advantage and ended up getting him kind of in a flow.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He played a outstanding second half, and that team took risks knowing what the risks were going to be taken on the opposite side of the ball. That fourth down, I think it was 4th and inches, and and everyone was like, they got a QB sneaking with Trevor here. And then they had 3 backs in the backfield or something, and Travis Etienne got that sweep off the right side, got 30 yards. That's the kind of stuff that Doug Peterson is doing. that you realize that's not what a lot of teams, that's not especially what, Brandon Staley and underneath him, Joe Lombardi, were calling. Like, you need to be able to, even if it like means that you have to do something outside the box, you have to be able to go for explosive plays at times. And that's just something the Chargers offense refuses to do, or at least has refused to do before they fired Joe Lombardi.
I think we've said enough about the playoff games that have passed. I think we can move on to the ones that are coming up. We kind of talked a little bit about the Eagles Giants, but I do think it will be an interesting game. I think a lot of this game will depend on Evan Neal and Xavier McKinney, specifically those two players, because Evan Neal has not been good this season. Obviously, he's only a rookie. He was taken high, but if he has one night where he plays like he's still wearing crimson and white, like he's playing in Alabama, then, there's something special that could happen for that Giants offense, and they're going to need it. And then on the other hand, Xavier McKinney has been playing with, pins in his hand and a giant, club for the past few games. He's finally supposedly going to be 100%. And that will be huge for the Giants because they've refused to blitz him because of his hand, which is, smart. But he's such a weapon that they need him back at full strength, and it looks like they're going to have him.
His biggest thing is his versatility, the fact that you can move him around and have him do whatever things. And like that defense needs a guy like that who you are able to move around and just have him go make plays everywhere on the football. And especially because of how aggressive they are and they call those blitz packages, and like, you just need a guy that can go fly around and make plays. And when your guy that does that is not at full strength, your defense is not going to be at full strength, obviously. So that is a huge thing. And then, like you said, Evan Neal, because how many guys Philadelphia's got that they're going to just, have flying through those gaps trying to make plays in the run and the pass game. Like, you've got to be able to protect Daniel Jones. And the biggest thing is you have to be able to get Saquon Barkley going, because you're not going to be able to win that game if you don't have a run game, because Philly is going to pound the ball repetitively, whether they're playing a good front or not. And the Giants, we've seen their defensive front is like Dexter Lawrence having a great season. So Philly's going to be running the ball, even despite no matter who's in those gaps, you've got to be able to come back and do the same thing, because you don't want to be playing from behind like that.
Yeah, and Lane Johnson is looking like he's going to be coming back for the Eagles, which is big. But do you really want a rusty Lane Johnson going against Kayvon Thibodeau?
It's Lane Johnson, so I'm never going to say no, but I get where you're coming from.
He hasn't played in like more than a few weeks.
Yeah, no, I totally see where you're coming from. That's the kind of thing with this Eagles team is like, I don't know. This just feels like a team that could come out really rusty, because
it's a trap game for sure. And that's weird to say.
Without a doubt. It's so weird to say for the playoffs, but it is, because the difference in these teams, at least on paper, is massive. It's a divisional game. And
the Giants are the away team.
Like we said last week, they didn't have the Eagles have not had those losses where they've been punched in the mouth and had to adjust. Every single one has either been because of a backup quarterback, injuries, or a call at the end of the game that they believe lost them the game.
I don't know that it's not that they're not going to be prepared for the Giants, because obviously they've played them, but it's really hard to beat the same team 3 times in 7 weeks.
That's a huge thing.
And when one of those weeks you didn't play, so the same team 3 times in 6 games is ridiculous. It's hard enough to beat a team twice in the same season.
It's hard enough to beat a team 3 times in the same season, but the fact that you played them both down the stretch of games, like, that makes it even harder, because now these teams have clearly like prepared, and like the Giants are going to come out with counters. Like, that's just what's going to happen. Brian Daboll, we've said, is having a coach of the year type season. If you don't believe that he's going to come out with something different this game, or at least somewhat different, you're lying to yourself. So, I mean, I think that one is going to be like a lot of fun.
And you have Wink on the other side. Like, I understand.
Wink's a genius.
I understand Wink's tenure with the Ravens didn't end on a great note, which it's hilarious that he got fired and now all of a sudden he's getting head coaching looks just 1 year later. Shows you how great the Ravens are at, coaching staffs and all that jazz. hilarious. But Wink is a mastermind, and he's an evil mastermind, and he's going to scheme something up to make Jalen Hurts uncomfortable. And if, the Eagles get a little bit cute and they're like, hey, we want to prove that Jalen Hurts can throw the ball, this is not the time for that.
Yeah,
Wink will make them pay for that.
If they start getting, like you said, too cute, they will get punched in the mouth. The Giants have the guys, whether we like it or not, especially on their coaching staff, to go be like, yeah, this team, they don't think we're a good team. We're going to go show them that and punch them in the mouth. That game is certainly going to be fun. Like we said, divisional matchup in the divisional round, which is cool. As for the other divisional round matchup in the NFC, we were just talking about it a little bit, should be the most fun coaching matchup of any of these. We've got the Cowboys and 49ers, and namely Kellen Moore versus Kyle Shanahan.
It's interesting because I feel like we all know who's going to win this, but then we're relying on the quarterback who is the last pick this year. And
yeah,
he feels like a non-factor.
Yeah, that's what that Shanahan offense does, man. You don't even think about Brock Purdy. You're like, you kind of just think, there is you think of Brock Purdy as like a replacement level quarterback, and you're like, wow, that's all the 49ers need to win this game. And that's how you feel about them against just about any team in the NFL outside of like maybe the Chiefs. Like you just feel like, oh, all they need is a replacement level quarterback. They can probably go win any game. And that might be right, but it's going to be like we talked about, just such an interesting matchup. If Kellen Moore and if Dak is on like he was last game, we could be in for like game of the year type scenario.
It's gonna very much fall on the shoulders of Dak.
And that's what it is, man. 100%.
Consequently, it's not going to fall on the shoulders of Brock Purdy. It's going to fall on everyone else just executing and doing what they have to do, and Brock Purdy just can't make mistakes. That's all it comes down to.
Especially if they potentially go down early, because this Cowboys team, like we've seen, is super hot right now. If they just come out early and start swinging and they, San Francisco goes down 2 scores and maybe they start throwing the ball a little too much, you never know what we could see from Brock Purdy because we really haven't seen him in those kind of scenarios.
All right, let's move on to the next divisional matchup, which, I'm very interested to hear your take on this one because we do have the Chiefs versus the Jags. And obviously, the Chiefs are the best team. It feels that way when you watch them, but mostly because of Patrick Mahomes. Like that offense, other than Travis Kelce, hasn't been too special weapons-wise.
You just never feel like you can count out Mahomes. And these two teams met earlier in the year, and it did not go well for Jacksonville. And as much as I really do want to see Jacksonville, keep winning and go on this little bit of like a miracle run, it would be really fun just because who doesn't like Doug Peterson and who doesn't like Trevor Lawrence?
I don't like Trevor Lawrence.
Oh, well. That's just
I'm an Alabama fan. You thought I would like Trevor Lawrence? Come on.
You get what I mean. The average public, I feel like they're kind of negative on him, but I feel like this is just a fun team and it could be a fun year for them. But the last time they played, the Chiefs beat them by 10. And it's just, I find it hard to believe that these two teams are that much different, especially I feel like the Chiefs are even better than they were, whatever that was, over 2 months ago. So I feel like we're in for probably a Chiefs blowout. But if we can somehow, just for even like a couple quarters, get like a little bit of like a Mahomes-Lawrence showdown, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it'll be close at some point in the game. I don't know if that will be the start and then never again, or if it'll be close, a little bit later in the game. But it's really going to come down to how Doug Peterson calls the game, in my opinion.
This does very much seem like it could be similar to the way that 49ers and Seahawks just went, where it was like, okay, they're hanging in there. Like Seattle's hanging in there. And then before you know it, they're down like 20. And you're like, this game was close 5 minutes ago. What just happened? And I just feel like that's the kind of way that this game could go. It could be like, you could be going in the fourth quarter and it's like 23-17 Chiefs. And then you look at the screen again 5 minutes later, and it's 37-17 Chiefs. Like, I just feel like that's kind of the way that we can see this game go. But we do have one more matchup, and that is Bengals and Bills, the game that we sadly did not get to see because of DeMar Hamlin's injury. And now we are getting that rematch, so to speak, even though it's the first time these teams are actually going to meet and play a full game. And I have to say, like we said, the Bills look beatable, and there is no quarterback that has gotten like hotter over the last like stretch than Joe Burrow. I mean, I understand they just had a rough wild card matchup, but Joe Burrow just seems like this kind of quarterback that you can't count out in these kind of games.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Burrow, other than, obviously when he didn't play at Ohio State and then his first season at LSU, since then, he's always kind of been that guy that you're like, hey, watch out, Joe Burrow. He could get hot here. And when he's hot, he's one of the best in the league. When he's not hot, he's, middle of the pack, but he's still a really good quarterback.
But he's hot most of the time, and the fact that you get that consistently, it seems now for 2 straight years down the stretch that it keeps happening, and the decision making keeps getting better, and the fact that this is one of the few quarterbacks in the league whose arm strength has legitimately improved since he got into the NFL. Like his rookie year, it looked like he was going to have one of the weaker arms in football, and now it's like, I would say at least average, which is kind of crazy to think about. And he just continues to improve in every facet of the game. And now you're looking at him as one of the best quarterbacks in the entire playoffs remaining.
It really has been crazy. Personally, if the Bills play the way that they did against the Dolphins, there's no shot they win this game.
No,
but I don't think they will.
That's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they will. So I think the Bills probably have this one. But again, Joe Burrow could be Joe Burrow and just go off.
We could have, if the Bills defense specifically lets up the kind of stuff they were letting up against Miami, like their offense, the Bills offense played largely very well. But if their defense plays how they did against Miami, giving up as many opportunities as they did, which Skylar Thompson did not take advantage of and still scored like 30 points, you could be in for a huge game from Joe Burrow, and we could be in for what really could become a quarterback duel. That being said, I'm probably rolling with Buffalo just because they're such a more well-rounded team, and in the playoffs, coaching matters. And who am I going to trust? Sean McDermott, who has shown us that he can win.
Not Zach Taylor.
Or Zach Taylor, and it's
not Zach Taylor.
I'm rolling with McDermott. I'm rolling with the Bills.
So, as we hinted at in the beginning of the show, we are going to talk about something a little bit different for this podcast. Don't get your hopes up. It's nothing, crazy. But we are going to be diving more into the draft and the Senior Bowl and things like that because we are going down to Mobile on the 30th. We'll have live shows every day. So make sure to follow us on YouTube and Twitter for that. But we're going to talk about the coaching staffs that released today. So I think we should first obviously talk about how coaching staffs work for the Senior Bowl. So this is the first year that they've done this. But last year they started with coordinators for the teams with the 2 lowest picks that have returning coaching staffs are going to be the head coaches of this game. So for that, we get Luke Getsy and Patrick Graham. From there, last year they picked, other coaches on the staff to kind of be the, coordinators for both sides.
The rest of the staff, yes.
Exactly. But this year they decided to take, go a little bit deeper into the draft and pick up some coordinators from other teams, which I think is a really interesting concept. And I think will be a lot of fun to see how these guys work together. With that being said, we're going to hop right into this. Excuse me. So our head coaches are Patrick Graham of the Raiders.
Yep.
And Luke Getsy of the Bears. Personally, I'm very familiar with Patrick Graham.
And as am I. I mean, he went from Miami to New York and runs that very Belichick type scheme that we've seen kind of take over a lot of teams' defenses. It's certainly going to be an interesting one because they require a very particular set of like a skill set for players. And I think that could be an interesting topic, especially for the DBs, because that is such a DB reliant system that we could see. I mean, obviously they don't go too deep into scheme at the Senior Bowl like necessarily. It's a lot of like basic kind of stuff, even though they test some guys individually. But it could be cool to see guys in like those man situations, specifically those defensive backs.
Yeah, and then on the other side, we have Luke Getsy, who is the offensive coordinator for the Bears, which is interesting because obviously the Bears have the number 1 overall pick, and having their offensive coordinator being the head coach of the Senior Bowl team would be a huge advantage in most years. They don't need a quarterback. They have Justin Fields, and if they were going to draft a quarterback, none of those quarterbacks are going to be at the Senior Bowl, even if they didn't have Justin Fields. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Getsy does with, this opportunity, because it's really going to be more for him to look at, later round talent than looking at that early round offensive talent that
and
you bring to mind when you think about the Senior Bowl in the first pick.
Yeah, and a big thing, like you said, the fact that we're not getting, it's Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, obviously not seniors, so we're not going to be getting them at the Senior Bowl. And then this is also a team in Chicago that a lot of what we've seen is them trading down and what looks like probably going best defensive player available. So, like you said, putting their offensive coordinator there would normally be a big thing, but he's going to be looking, like you said, a lot more at those mid to late round guys rather than those first and second round talents, because they traded their second round pick for Chase Claypool. They don't have that anymore. And then their first round pick could very easily be used on a guy like Will Anderson. So you might not see an offensive player picked until at least the third round. So if you're a Bears fan, if you're looking to see at these two different rosters who ends up getting what, it'll be very interesting to see if guys that are projected to go mid to late rounds as receivers and offensive linemen end up getting paired with Getsy, somebody who could potentially be looking to draft those guys come April.
Another interesting piece is the American coaching staff, which is Getsy's side, has their offensive coordinator as Atlanta Falcons quarterbacks coach Charles London, which is real interesting. If you saw the TikTok that I put out on at Krumich Sports the day that we're recording this, regarding the fact that the Falcons put out a tweet and it basically said, "Hey, Desmond Ridder wasn't good this year." Obviously, those weren't the exact words, but it was not kind remarks for Desmond. And having access to these quarterbacks, which it'll be interesting to see what quarterbacks end up on which roster. Like, I don't think they're going to go with like Stetson Bennett, but it will be interesting to see what they do with the quarterback situation. If they're going to make a trade, if they're going to, go with one of these late round guys, let them compete and just see what happens. And if neither of them work, oh well, type thing. So I think Charles London getting this look at offensive coordinator, which is a big deal for him, being that he's only been a running backs or quarterback coach or just, a quality control coach, is really cool for him and is going to be a big deal for a lot of Falcons fans.
And for as far as London is concerned, this is also an interesting deal because I believe, if I remember my Falcons assistants correctly, this was somebody who was given a lot of the credit for the Cordarrelle Patterson switch in fit, like how well it worked in Atlanta, and the fact that he, takes all these snaps out of the backfield and is a full-time running back now and had so much success. So seeing if guys get, moved around come practice week and come game day could be very interesting, especially on, like we said, that American team led by London. As for their defensive coordinator, it is New England Patriots defensive line coach DeMarcus Covington, which I find really interesting because of the fact that we already have Patrick Graham, who's on the national team, who runs that similar system. And then we have Covington on the American team, who is another Patriots disciple. So we're going to be seeing probably, like I said, they don't go too deep in a scheme necessarily, but maybe a lot of similar focus points and scheme things that these guys are going to attempt to prepare these players for throughout the week.
Yeah, I think it is going to be kind of a weird thing, but then again, we could see the national side, which is Patrick Graham's team, run more of the Grady Brown Steelers offense because Grady Brown is going to be the defensive coordinator for that team. He is the defensive back coach for the Steelers, which is really interesting because there are a lot of very underrated, misutilized in college defensive backs. So it's going to be interesting to see where those guys fall if they put them on the other side so that, there's no defensive back favoritism on the national team, or if Brown gets to get an up close and personal look at those guys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're a defensive player, like the amount of attention that defensive backs are going to get, this is your weekend. This is your week to shine because, like I said, you've got Graham, who comes from that Patriot system, and what do they rely on to make that thing work? Great play from the back end. What is DeMarcus Covington from New England? What does their defense rely on? Great play from the back end. And then you've got a Steelers defensive backs coach there on the opposite side. So you have so much attention that is going to be put on these defensive backs that if you go out and you have a field day, who knows? You could jump rounds in your stock solely based off this week alone. And then the last guy that we have here is the national team's offensive coordinator, which is New Orleans Saints quarterbacks coach and pass game coordinator, Ronald Curry. So, I mean, a team that definitely, needs a quarterback at some point in New Orleans, doesn't have their first round pick, I believe. I believe that goes to Philadelphia. Is going to probably be looking at those mid to late round quarterback prospects and seeing who they could potentially be going after. And that's definitely, in my opinion, a pretty interesting shot. Like I said here, Getsy already going to be looking at mid to late round offensive prospects. And then you've got the rest of those quarterbacks that'll definitely be looked at by guys like Curry.
I'm very excited for the Saints to get a look at Max Duggan. I think that would be so much fun. I'm also excited for, everyone in general to get a look at Tyson Bagent, who is the Shepherd quarterback. He holds a bunch of all-time D2 records and is a really fun watch. All of Shepherd's games were broadcasted live on YouTube, and they are still up. So if you want to go check them out, just search Shepherd Football on YouTube. But that's going to be it for us. We're going to have more Senior Bowl content. We promise. It's only going to keep growing as the playoffs wind down and we head towards Senior Bowl week. So thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a comment. Join the chalkboard because it's a lot of fun in there. We're getting it back up and running again. And that's all I got. Peace.